Welcome to the mid to late 2000s Edge era, the time where mature shooters and open world games were the shit, and previously cartoony franchises were having a collective Linkin Park phase, taking on a much more dark and gritty approach, in order to appeal to what was considered cool and marketable at the time. Hell, Doom, which was comically edgy by default, got even edgier. Where do I stand on this era? Well, I actually quite like a lot of things from this era. Hell, it was the one I grew up in to begin with. As far as cartoony game franchises that transitioned this era go, there are some that I admit handle it pretty well. But there were also the other edgy takes that came off as way too try-hard, gimmicky, and overall really dumb. Alternatively, you had games that were kind of out of place when compared to the predecessors and overall really unorthodox. Though that doesn't necessarily mean they're bad. But if there was a poster child for this era, then that would definitely be Shadow the Hedgehog. Now, it's no secret that, from conception, Sonic was always kinda meant to pander to what was cool at the time, being the spunky, rebellious, cool alternative to Mario, and this has worked out and given us great material. But Shadow, the game, is something else, alright. If you want a good glimpse at this game's utter ridiculousness, then just look at the intro. That is still cool and beautifully animated, but absolutely bonkers. But I know someone who is better at picking apart this intro than I am, so for the sake of this video, allow me to bring in an old friend out of retirement.
Whenever I first saw the Shadow the Hedgehog intro, I was just a kid. I mean, I had a copy for it for the GameCube, and I remember I plopped it in, I slapped the like disc reader shut, and I looked at my screen and I saw Shadow the Hedgehog skipping over like a big mountain with like the moon like lighting everything in the back. I thought, oh, okay, that's not so bad. Wait, is that a fucking gun? And then he, like, pulled it out, and he cocked an SMG, which at the time I was like, that's, oh my god. And then next, you just see him hopping around town on this, like, silver motorcycle, driving around, and he's just, he had the most angriest face. Like, it looked like he had to take a violent shit while he wanted to assassinate his worst enemy. And then, like, you just see all the soldiers shooting at, like, all these demons from, like, Doom 2016 falling from the fucking sky. And then, like, later on, you know, you just see him sitting there and he's like, ugh, you know, with his arms crossed and stuff. And then he's, like, teleporting around, kicking the shit out of these, like, demons. And, you know, the city's all red and covered in fire. And then you see, like, Sonic running around or whatever. And it just, none of it made any sense. It was perplexing, and I was, like, I was almost scared. I mean, I was just sitting there and I was like, you know, staring at the TV, and then you see, like, the soldier of the U.S. Army and Eggman pointing to get the forces out, and you see, like, a big Metroid-looking thing, like, summoning the Death Star beam onto the planet, and then you see Shadow, and he's, like, standing over that soldier, and he's like, ah! And he, like, wants to kill people, and then you see Sonic fucking dead, with Shadow standing over his corpse with a gun, and he just flies away, and then that was the intro sequence to Shadow the Hedgehog. And I sat there holding my fucking GameCube controller in a cold sweat, and I was thinking, I just wanted to play Sonic Adventure 3.
That would be my good friend who used to go by the alias of Gur. He's currently in the process of restructuring his channel. I'll have a link to it in the description. I hope he's successful in that endeavor. So, yeah, when this game was announced, it was not uncommon for people to think that this was some sort of April Fool's joke, satirizing the current trend of dark, edgy 3D platformers. But no, it was real. And it eventually came out on November 15th of 2005. Hilariously enough, the exact same day Pac-Man World 3, another example of a dark and gritty take on a classic franchise, would also come out.
'Cause you and me, we're like brothers, only closer.
Upon release, Shadow the Hedgehog gained negative reception from both fans and critics. And while I'm not denying the percentage of people that may like this game, it's not uncommon for someone to consider this the beginning of Sonic's Dark Age, a period from 2005 to 2010 where Sonic wasn't exactly in the best critical image. More on that subject later. For now, let's analyze this game to see if and how it falls apart. Visual pun intended. Let's start with a common source of vexation many players have with the game, the controls. Control-wise, it's a little bit better than Sonic Heroes, but that's not saying much. Ultimately, it's still too slippery, but just like with Heroes, it is something you can work around and get used to. Thankfully, there are no broken pinball physics, and the amount of bottomless pits are cut down. And yeah, the latter of which is something I forgot to mention in my Heroes review, because there was a lot of it there. In fact, now that it comes to my mind, the controls and overall physics are the closest this game gets to being Sonic Heroes 2, minus the team gimmick. The triangle jump returns from Heroes, but I feel that it's put to much better use here. The homing attack is kind of finicky, however, which for combat isn't too much of an issue, since most of the time you won't be using the homing attack, but rather the various different weapons you pick up. I'll get into that later. However, for platforming in situations where you don't have weapons, it can be an issue. But fortunately, despite being a bit clunky, it still works most of the time. The spin dash is back, however it's been botched so badly to the point where it might as well not even be here, especially since you gain so much momentum from basic movement alone. They did, however, improve the lightspeed dash, though it still has some issues. It's nice to know that it's less problematic here. But guess what? They finally fixed rail switching! Hallelujah! Thanks, Solaris! Something I had complained about in the previous 2 reviews is finally fixed. Unfortunately, the rail grinding mechanic is even more dumbed down, and with every Sonic game to come after, it would continue to get simplified to the point of no return. It's whatever. At least here it's organically incorporated into the level design and is a fun diversion. Now, let's talk about one controversial aspect of this game, that being the gunplay. On a contextual standpoint, it's something that is never really justified, and it is kinda dumb, especially since Shadow seems like somebody who's more powerful on his own and doesn't need the aid of weapons. The weapon system is a game mechanic first, but there's never really story or character-specific reasons as to why it's here. That said, as a game mechanic, I actually really enjoy it. The game is basically a 3D Jazz Jackrabbit game. I mean, both are basically speedy platformers with an emphasis on shooting, though one is a Sonic game and the other is a Sonic clone. Well, I digress. It's just fun to blast down enemies as I speed through these stages. The variety of weapons is strong, ranging from realistic human guns to wacky alien weapons. As the game progresses, the weapons become more powerful and crazy, with my favorites being the Gatling gun, the splitter, and the refractor. There are even a few sections where you are required to use specific weapons to manipulate parts of the environment, which I find neat, and I wish the game experimented with that concept a little more. Also, the weapons do a really good job of locking onto targets. There are also additional special weapons you can gain access to after completing a run of the game, that you get through the specific Shadow Emblem crates. My favorite of these special weapons is the Egg Vacuum, which was evidently made to promote Billy Hatcher and the Giant Egg. It's a neat little weapon that sucks up enemies and items and eventually explodes into 1-ups. Also, it's a weapon that sucks things up and has the head shaped like a chicken. I'd make a really bad pun right about now, but I want to hold on to my dignity. But what about Shadow's Chaos abilities? Well, by now, you may have noticed these 2 meters on the top. You fill them by killing enemies on either the hero or dark side. When one is full, Shadow will go into Chaos mode, a double trigger-like state where he gains temporary invincibility, unlimited ammo, and depending on what meter you fill, you can use Chaos Blast, which damages enemies around you, or Chaos Control, which allows you to zip through parts of the level, turning the Y button into
the beat a game button.
The ultimate power. I found it, the 4th emerald.
You never thought you'd beat a hard game like that, not without the beat a game button.
When trying to beat the mission objectives of particular levels, this can be problematic, but when going for the neutral objectives, they are fine and can be pretty useful. The combat is easy for the most part, but what helps it hold up is the strong enemy variety that keeps it from getting stale. Out of all the Sonic games that attempted combat, this and Heroes are probably the only ones to get it right in my eyes. There are also several vehicles you can use. Some are mandatory, but most are optional. and most of these are either too slow or clunky, and are honestly not fun to use. I do like some of these, like the alien birds you use for flying sections, and the walker mech in Sky Troops, which can jump really high and is used for some fun platforming. But aside from those two exceptions, most of the boss fights are a joke. Yeah, they have cool attacks and can be fun depending on how you fight them, but ultimately, you can just max out your ammo or your chaos gauge and just go ham on the boss. Alternatively, you also have bosses that are a complete tedious drag to fight. There is one particular boss that I did like, Black Doom. His attacks are well telegraphed, he defends himself well, and he's fun to fight. Most of the levels in this game, aside from some glaring exceptions, are pretty great. There's a lot of great platforming with a couple of branching pathways thrown in, and the speed is consistently present. The game also does a good job of throwing new things at you, overall having a good amount of variety. That said, I did say there were exceptions, so why don't we get those out of the way? Oh boy! Lost Impact! My favorite! Now, it's true, every Sonic game has that one level that no one likes to play. But so far in this retrospective, Lost Impact and its sister level, The Doom, are probably the worst ones yet. They're confusing, overly claustrophobic, flat, dull, and boring! Which is unfortunate because the idea behind these levels is great. Having them take place during Gun's raid on the Space Colony arc, with Maria tagging along, that stuff is neat. We even get backstory in the Artificial Chaos, an enemy type in Sonic Adventure 2, and that's some great world building. Unfortunately, these stages are terrible in terms of execution. At least the music in these stages are great. But while these particular stages, and a few others, are pretty annoying, a lot of the other levels are still really fun in my eyes. A good amount of great levels always drown out the bad ones, and the good levels in this game? Oh boy. You have Sky Troops, which has such a fucking majestic atmosphere with fun platforming involving the previously mentioned mech, as well as cool moments where you're flying an alien bird through a storm. Or how about Lava Shelter, with its lava-themed hazards and fun rail-grinding sections? How about Circus Park, with its fiery hoops and other circus-themed level gimmicks? Or how about my favorite levels, the ever-so-Tron-like Digital Circuit and Mad Matrix, with Digital Circuit having you travel through a light speed circuit, consistently having to avoid firewalls, while having sections where you travel through the searchlight thingamabob, and then the sister level Mad Matrix, almost following the exact same structure, except with a bigger scope. Now, while I do intend to save talk about the graphics for later, I'm gonna say I do like a lot of the look of these stages, whether it be the colorfulness of the cyberspace levels in Circus Park, or the Halo-like look of Death Ruins and the Final Haunt. I'm glad this game still retains some of Heroes' wacky nature, even if there is more of a grimdark vibe. So this game seems pretty fun, right? Well, so far I've only talked about the levels on the basis of their neutral runs. But I have yet to talk about a particular detail regarding the game: the mission system and overall level progression. In the levels, you'll come across a character that represents the good side, and a character that represents the bad side. Both will ask you for your help, and depending on who you end up helping or the action you take in a particular level, the course you take in a playthrough is affected in a certain way. This is actually an idea that was intended for Sonic Adventure 2, but was scrapped, and that was for the best because here it's a mess. The idea is great, but what kills it are the annoying missions. Remember when I complained about the chaotics in my Heroes review? Well, that's almost 2/3 of this game! Yay! Now, to be fair, not all the missions are bad. There are a handful of good ones, in fact. The best missions are the ones that either involve chasing after one big moving target, or the ones where you're tasked with interacting with several hard-to-miss targets that change up and influence the level design. What makes these missions good is that they change up the way you approach certain levels in interesting ways. You even have some missions that merely involve going beyond the goal ring, as well as others that are just fine. but a good chunk of the missions equate to kill all the enemies in the level, collect all the MacGuffins, destroy all the things, or in other words, collectathon bullshit in a linear level structure. Yes, because backtracking totally won't be egregious as all hell with this type of structure. But in juxtaposition, you also have more open-ended levels with the same type of objective, yet it's also just as dreadful there because I find myself not knowing where the fuck to look for whatever enemy or item I'm after. Like, geez, it's almost like an exploration get-em-all playstyle like this would have benefited from a radar system. But it's not like Sonic Team have done anything like that before. Oh wait. Also, remember how I complained about Lost Impact and how bad that level was? Well, the hero mission in that level is downright atrocious. I mean, mother of chaos! Look at this insanity!
Holy Jesus. What is that? What the fuck is that?
Thankfully, you aren't required to beat every mission in the game. However, that didn't stop this game from having bullshit requirements for getting into the final story. You see, this game has 10 endings. Well, technically it has 3 endings with each having their own variations. Thing is, there is only one path that can truly be considered canon. Most of these endings are non-canon and don't matter in the long run. Yet, ironically enough, you still need to get all the endings. Yes, that's right! You need to beat the game not once, not 3 times, not even 5 times, but 10 times! You have to beat the game 10 times! Oh boy! I beat the game! Now I have to do it again! And again! And again!
And again! And again! And again! And again! And again! And again! And again! And again! And again! And again! And again!
Talk about artificial padding! Thing is, the final story requirements are both better and worse than they were in Heroes. At least here, you won't be forced to go through the exact same set of levels and bosses 4 times in a row. At least here, you'll have a different set of levels each. Still, the requirement of needing to beat it 10 times is still an issue. And by that time, you've unlocked every level, or just beat the game 5 times, it already starts to overstay its welcome. It would be like if in Mario 64 you're forced to collect all 120 stars instead of the required minimum of 70. Now, part of the fun with Mario 64 and certain other collectathon platformers that follow its style is the choice they give you. You don't have to collect all 120 stars, but you can if you want to. In general, it has this interesting approach to progression that I admire. However, if there is any game I should be making a comparison to, then it's definitely Star Fox 64. That game has a similar style of progression to Shadow, but not only did it come first, but it did it better. Getting to the true ending of that game was based around the path you take and your overall skill. Yeah, there's a bit of trial and error, but I feel that helps incentivize replay value. A lot of the actions that lead to these alternate paths generally involve doing things like following Falco to a different exit, or beating this particular boss quick enough before Slippy charges at the boss and gets knocked down to Titania. Now these are much more interesting than tedious as hell kill all the enemy missions that this game likes to shove down the player's throat. You can't have your cake and eat it too. But this game tries to do that, and as a result, we are left with a mess of a progression system. As far as the story as a whole goes, we start off with Shadow standing on the outskirts of a city, wondering about his past, until a bunch of aliens start attacking.
Look how pathetic they are. I don't have time for these humans.
Ah yes, because if you're gonna use amnesia, you might as well use it to erase character development. Nice. Shadow is then visited by Black Doom, who says he will tell Shadow about his past if he collects the 7 Chaos Emeralds. And then the plot goes flip-flop in all sorts of directions. Now, before I get into the plot some more, let's discuss the main anomaly. The hedgehog in the room, if you will. Shadow himself. Now, in my Adventure 2 review, I said this. His story ends with his sacrifice for the greater good, and yeah, Shadow's arc in this game is great. And it's a complete one too. It would have been perfect if he were to have stayed dead here. Then in my Heroes review, I said this, and honestly, that was for the best, because we wouldn't have gotten Team Dark otherwise. Now, I may have stated that I like Team Dark as a trio, but that isn't me justifying them bringing him back. I could live without Team Dark if it meant Shadow's sacrifice still had its impact. I'm well aware that Shiro Miyakawa did not want to bring him back, but was forced to due to Sega's executive meddling, thus leading to more details getting put into Shadow's backstory that didn't even need to be there because it was just on its own. But guess what? Shadow's now half alien, I guess! Isn't that cool? Whatever. But if there's one thing to know, it's that bringing back characters from the dead for the sake of fanservice not only cheapens the effect of their death, but it can also lead to some really shitty storytelling. Sorry about that. But that's not always the case, as sometimes bringing back a character can work. I mean, look at how the Clone Wars brought back Darth Maul, and made his character even better than before. So, while Shadow being brought back did cheapen his sacrifice, giving him a worthwhile arc is a good trade-off. Well, does this game do that? Oh boy, things are about to get messy here. Well, I'm looking at this from two angles. 1. Does it answer the questions about Shadow that were presented in Heroes? 2. Does it give Shadow a good and satisfying arc? Let's answer that first one. Heroes presented us with the question on whether this is the real Shadow or a robotic duplicate. Well, this question is answered with a throwaway Easter egg line that you can only hear if you wait 10 minutes during the final boss. What is this Kingdom Hearts 3 base game bullshit where the important plot details are kept in the background? Well, that's a fucking fail. But did it at least give him a good arc? Well, this game has the right idea and intentions, but the execution is poor. The game is so damn tryhard and the writing is just bad. Many of the plot points either don't add up or are half-assed justifications of past events. Or even worse, retcons that fuck with the stories of previous games and add more plot holes to this one. Apparently Black Doom needs the Chaos Emeralds in order to have the Black Comet pass into the Earth's atmosphere. Yet somehow, he's still able to drop his soldiers through the Earth's atmosphere just fine. Where are we dropping, boys? Not to mention, 1,000 years prior, they were able to insert ruins and shit like that. So why do they need the emeralds? How come Gunn knew about the incoming alien attack and did nothing about it, or even prepare? This game also tries to make Gunn out to be heroes, despite having murdered a bunch of innocent people. I could go on and on about the stupid plot decisions in this game. Furthermore, Shadow's personality is downgraded. In SA2 and Heroes, while he may have seemed stoic on the outside, he still had a cool, collected, and overall likable, charismatic personality with a slight bit of edge, and was probably the most emotional character in SA2, and was intense in a cool way. Here, they made him a full-on dark, emo edgelord who doesn't care for the pathetic human. When people see Shadow as this dumb edgelord, this is the game that's responsible for that. Okay, so while editing together this review, I did realize there were a couple moments with Shadow that I did particularly like. Like this one moment he has with the commander.
Finally, justice is served!
If what you say is true, then I will respectfully accept my fate.
You mean to tell me that you really don't remember a thing?
But I just need some time to uncover the real truth.
I mean, that's some good stuff right there. And he does get some pretty good character development in the end. And in general, he still retains that same level of emotion he had from SA2. and is pretty much the most fleshed out character in the game. Still, that doesn't mean they didn't do some stupid stuff with him, and the writing is still overall pretty bad. Then you have Black Doom, who has a great character design that's wasted on a stupid villain with stupid motivations. I'm gonna save the humans by killing them. Yeah, sure, okay, fine. Here's your fucking dunce cap. Now, allow me to bring to attention another franchise with a blue protagonist that also had a side series of games on the GBA that also featured a popular side character with a much more darker tone. Of course, I'm referring to the Mega Man Zero series. Much like Shadow, Mega Man Zero takes a darker approach to storytelling than its previous counterparts. However, while Shadow failed at this, Zero succeeded by having that finesse. It was dark, yes, but it still retained that likability the universe had prior. Sure, it wasn't perfect, they did stumble a bit with the first game, thanks to X6, but as the series progressed, the narrative got better. Shadow had potential to be a more mature take that could have been good, but it was just wasted. The issue with Shadow isn't that it's edgy, or too serious, or any schlock like that. The issue is that it's forced and so poorly written with retcons and contrived plot points that it violently pulls out of its ass. It honestly gets to the point to where it feels almost like it was intentional. Almost as if it was intended to be tongue-in-cheek.
It's okay. It's all right. Come on.
Well, actually, that was just footage from the movie Independence Day, but the real laser would be a lot like that. Yeah. Scary.
And, well, if you look at it from an ironic standpoint, it can be enjoyable. Still, I feel that this character I love so much deserves better. But I have to commend Shiro Murakawa on at least trying, given what he had to work with. It's not easy trying to make a good story with a character you had intended to stay dead. I do, however, like the idea that he had for Shadow after 06, even if it is a bit much like Mega Man Zero. I honestly feel that Murakawa is the best writer this series has ever got. But as is, for Shadow's new arc, Heroes got us on the right track, only for Shadow to fucking derail it. What's worse is that not only does this game follow up on and conclude the plot threads introduced in Heroes, but also the ones introduced in Sonic Adventure 2, making this a really shitty conclusion. You know, now that I think about it, this game takes so much from Sonic Adventure 2's plot. It may as well have just been Sonic Adventure 3. Granted, it would have been a really shitty Sonic Adventure 3, but nonetheless, it kind of is. Honestly, forget Team Dark. It's almost like bringing Shadow back was a mistake. Well, I did say almost. We still have one more game where Shadow plays an important role, so maybe they can redeem him there. I guess we'll have to save our final judgment for that one. Shadow the Hedgehog features a completely different voice cast consisting of the actors from the 4Kids dub of Sonic X, pretty much replacing the previous adventure cast, with their last game being Sonic Advance 3. As for the reason why this happened, well, this particular reasoning is something I can't entirely confirm since I've only heard it, so bear with me. Supposedly, after Dean Bristow's death, they were looking to replace him with Mike Pollock as Eggman's voice. When Yuji Naka caught wind of this, he thought, hey, why don't we just replace the whole cast? Probably wanting to streamline things between the games and the anime, which is understandable. After all, that's how things were in Japan. Kinda makes me wonder if they'll do the same with the current cast by having Ben Schwartz replace Roger Craig Smith. But only time will tell on that. I will say I do miss the adventure cast so much. I do, however, find the 4Kids cast to be alright. They do have a bit of a rocky start here. I blame the voice direction on that, as later games would prove these are pretty good actors. In this game, however, Jason Griffith as Shadow is fine, but his Sonic voice has this nasty habit of overemphasizing every single syllable. Amy Pallant's voice sounds like a woman trying too hard to sound like a boy and failing. Dan Green's Knuckles voice loses that cool and chill vibe he had before, and now he just sounds like an idiot tough guy. Amy... well, I'll admit, Lisa Ortiz might be on par with Jennifer Doller as her best voice. Mike Pollock as Dr. Eggman may be the most consistently good voice actor in the whole series. As a successor to Dean Bristow, he does a great job, and I hope he continues to voice the Good Doctor for as humanly possible. I could go on with the rest of the cast, but I don't want to focus on this too much. So I'll just say the rest of the cast ranges from okay to decent to bleh. Visually, the game is a mixed bag. While I have stated that I do like many of the environments, there are some that are just unpleasant to look at. The graphics and texture work don't really hold up, but some of the nicer looking levels kinda hide that. The CG cutscenes are gorgeous, and they make me want a fully CG Sonic movie. If there is one thing that's common law, it's that all Sonic games need a killer soundtrack. And Shadow the Hedgehog is no exception. You'd think that a game like this, given its cover art and the time it came out, would mostly consist of thrashing nu metal type of music. And there is a lot of that, along with a bunch of rave-style music, but the variety is much stronger than that. You have a lot more calmed down music that has this chilling vibe to them. However, not only does the music sound great, but it does a damn good job fitting into the levels and the situations surrounding the levels. The music even fits into the story well, even being able to convey it better than the actual narrative. A basis of comparison would be the themes in Gun Fortress and Final Haunt and how they contrast. Gun Fortress, being the final level of the pure dark path, has this somber, melancholic acoustic melody that represents a feeling of regret, being that on this path, Shadow has completely aligned with the Black Arms race and is far from redemption at this point. Or with Final Haunt being the last pure hero level, having an upbeat rock hip-hop hybrid, and represents a Shadow that is at peace with himself and has come to terms with his past, being ready to defend humanity and the Earth as a way of fulfilling Maria's wish. So, after going insane trying to beat this game 10 times, you'll finally gain access to the final story. Is it worth it?
The answer is yes.
Kind of. But mostly
No.
the final level, The Last Way, is nothing but a rehash of Final Haunt, where this time you're forced to use Chaos Control and other minor changes that don't add much. Sonic Adventure 2 had a final level that was unique. This, however, is lazy.
Never really understood me. You always put me down.
The final boss is such a slog. I hope you like charging up an attack only for it to miss due to shoddy collision detection. I hope you like continuously circling the ugly fuck in repetitive fashion after you don't know what you're doing and the fight is a royal pain in the ass, or you know what you're doing and it's piss easy. The fight never evolves and it just comes off as repetitive. This is easily the worst final boss of the adventure era. And it kind of ends it off on a low note.
All things considered, the actual ending itself is pretty good, and it does do a nice job of wrapping up Shadow's arc. It's just everything before that was comical.
How ironic. After the way we all treated him, he saved us all in the end. We were all wrong about the professor.
Bruh.
Let us pay homage to Professor Gerald. Let's work to ensure peace and prosperity for a brighter future. What do you say, Commander?
Excellent idea, Mr. President.
Oh, and Jared Robotnik is apparently a great guy all of a sudden despite trying to end humanity 2 games ago. You know what, guys? Come get your fucking dunce caps. And that's Shadow the Hedgehog. It has some really neat ideas, but the execution on a lot of them is rather poor. A good chunk of the missions suck. Beating the game 10 times as a requirement drags it out for far too long, and the story is contrived as hell. But despite all these flaws, when I'm just playing the levels on the straightforward neutral path, I have a blast playing it. The gunplay is very enjoyable and the levels are something I get a kick out of, with the variety being a strong point. So yeah, I still like this game, although I find it unfortunate that this game's poor reception killed potential for any Sonic character spin-off titles as a whole. I mean, imagine a Collectathon Knuckles game, or a vehicle combat game starring Eggman, or a Silver game that utilizes a telekinesis in interesting ways. Well, nonetheless, will I recommend it? Well, that's kinda tricky, since I'd say that's all based around your tolerance for bullshit. But hidden under that bullshit is a fun game. But out of all the main series games we've looked at so far, this one is by far the weakest. That said, Shadow would get negative reception upon release, and would at the time be seen as a low point for the series, with many starting to lose faith in Sonic Team. It is at this time apparent that Sonic Team needed something good for their next big title on the upcoming 7th generation consoles. They needed something big, ambitious, and special for the 50th anniversary. Something that would be a hit, bring the Blue Bird back on top, and make a big impact. Well, it certainly made a big impact, alright. In the opposite direction. But wait! Is it really that bad? Well, we will find out next time on the Sonic Retrospective as we look into the infamous Sonic 06.
the Iblis trigger.
Until then, I will see you all later.